Hi everybody, as it's kind of been a year since, well not even a year, a few months since I've done my Brighton SEO talk. I've got the other one coming up in a month's time, so I thought what I'd do is record what I've already done, so that you can have a watch of it before you see the next one. So I did this presentation back in October 2022 and spoke about cultural sociology and how culture impacts buyer behaviour and can help improve your rankings. So hopefully you find it useful and hopefully it inspires you to kind of make some changes with your international marketing campaigns. So let's get started with something nice and easy. What is culture? So you've probably all heard of culture in some shape or form, but if you're looking at it from a sociological point of view, it's kind of social behaviour, institutions and norms and everything that kind of goes into it. It can also encompass as well things like knowledge, beliefs, arts, laws, customs, capabilities and habits of the individual. So that's quite a lot of things that kind of go into building a culture. Most normally it's kind of attributed to a region or location. So you've probably all heard of things like, German culture, Irish culture, British culture, American culture. So that's kind of where most people hear about it. And why is it important? Well, in different countries, people behave in different ways. So you can see this really cool little mapping tool that comes from Erin Meyer's culture map. And you can see what she's done is mapped all of these different countries and all of these different cultures into ways that people communicate. So you can see that, for example, people in the US, they're low context communicators, whereas people in India and Egypt, per se, are more high context. You can see as well that, for example, like French people and Russian people are more confrontational than, say, people in India, Egypt, Turkey. So depending on where your culture and where your country lies on this kind of map, it gives you insights into how people behave and what sort of communication styles resonate with people. So you're probably wondering, what has this got to do with marketing? Well, imagine that you're writing, some marketing copy or a landing page, and you're doing it for people in the US. So the type of content that you're going to create for people in the US, it can be low context. It can have a little bit of information. It doesn't have to be so detailed because that's the sort of thing that they're used to. Whereas if you're doing the same campaign for people in India, they prefer lots of high context information. So if you want that landing page and if you want that marketing copy to resonate with them, you need to really make sure that you're giving them more information. The stuff that you're providing is more high context if you want them to convert. So even though, say, you could be doing an English campaign in India, an English campaign in the US, the type of information you're going to give them is going to change depending on where these English speakers are from. So knowing all of this, knowing how people behave, knowing what people's cultures are, it can really, really help you create better campaigns and get better results in different countries. And then moving on from that, you can take a look at, for example, Hofstede's cultural dimensions. So Hofstede was a sociologist. He did a lot of work on cross-cultural communication. And what he did was that he mapped different countries and different cultures to each of these 6 dimensions, what he called them. So you've got, for example, power distance index, individualism versus collectivism, masculinity versus femininity, uncertainty avoidant index, long versus short-term normative orientation, and indulgence versus restraint. I'm not going to go into each of them now, but I have got an ebook, which I'll put in the comments so that you can take a look and download that if you'd like more specific information on each of these every single points. But what you can get from these is, for example, some cultures like uncertainty, some cultures don't. Some cultures are more long-term focused rather than short-term focused. And this all gives you insights into what motivates people and what will get them to convert. So you can see how it is in real life here with these 4 countries. You've got Brazil, China, Germany, and the United States. So you can see all of the numbers are really, really different. So you can see here, for example, on the uncertainty avoidance, you can see that China scores low, and you can see that Brazil scores higher or Germany scores higher. So this can tell you a lot of different things, because say you are a company that does things like loans or banking, or investment, something that's more uncertain, you're going to have better luck in countries that don't quite avoid uncertainties as much as other countries. Or if you're targeting a country that is, say, more wary of uncertainties, you need to put that into your copy. You need to address their fears. You need to make sure that you're, telling them what they need to hear so that they can't be like, nope, I'm not going to go for it. So again, you can see here that by understanding where countries sit culturally, you can write better copy and it will resonate with people and you'll get better results. So you can probably see that as a bit of a recurring theme throughout this presentation. So moving on to something a little bit more psychological, you've got Vygotsky. This is the awkward part where I accidentally hit on him at Brighton SEO, so I'm not going to do that, but I will tell you about Vygotsky's social cultural theory. So he believed that human development results from dynamic interaction between individuals and society. So that shows that culture isn't something that we learn when we're adults or something. It's something that helps us develop. It's part of our development. So you can see that culture really, really is ingrained in us, and ignoring it when it comes to marketing doesn't really do you any favors. But what does this mean in real life? So we've talked a little bit about the theory, but culture can impact on lots of different things. It can impact on international communication, international negotiations, international management, and most importantly, which is why we're here today, is to talk about international marketing. So if you take a look at international communication, culture and where you come from really impacts the way you speak, the way you communicate. So a good way to put it is that what might be considered polite in one country could be very rude in another. And lots of different disagreements have happened because of communication differences and not understanding each other's culture. So this could include, for example, verbal communication. Are people more direct? Are they not more direct? Non-verbal communication. And also etiquette as well. So things like gift giving, dining, different customs that you do. If you're doing international business, you need to understand how this all works so that you don't come across as rude. You've got international negotiation as well. So all of us here are kind of from businesses. So you're all going to be used to different forms of negotiation, but this changes depending on where you come from. So in the West, we're very used to kind of shaking hands when we're done with a deal. But in Arabic speaking cultures in the Middle East, for example, they shake their hands when a deal is just beginning. So again, this could cause uncertainties and different communication issues if you don't understand that. You've got international management as well. So if you're managing international teams, you really, really need to be sensitive amongst the cultural differences amongst your teams. Otherwise, you're going to have some teams getting offended because they think some people are being rude to them. There are so many different disagreements that people have in offices because different teams are not well versed in the other team's kind of cultural ways of doing things. An example we could give here is, for example, in Japan. It's absolute sacrilege if you're going to write on a business card because it's deemed personal property. So in the West, for example, we'll go to a conference, someone will give you a business card, you write a note on it, and then it'll help you remember, to follow up or what they're interested in when you get back from the conference. But in Japan, you can't do that because it's extremely, extremely rude. And when you give your business cards, you have to have two hands and give it to people. So again, such a little thing, but it could be the difference between, making that sale in Japan and not making that sale in Japan because you come across as really rude. And then you have international marketing. So you need to understand how people think to market your product effectively. You need to resonate with them. You need to make sure that they understand what they're buying and that they feel like they're involved and you feel like they feel like you're talking to them. So what does this all mean for SEO? So for SEO, this means you need to get inside the mind of your international target audience. You need to understand their needs and motivation from a cultural perspective if you're going to speak to them. You need to understand why they want to buy something and speak to them culturally, because you could be missing the mark if you miss it out, and worse, you could actually offend people. So I thought I'd move on a little bit to kind of language and identity and show kind of why dealing with different languages and why dealing with multilingual and international SEO is more than just, Google translating something into one language. What's the best example for that? I thought, Northern Ireland and the Irish language. So those of you who don't know about the situation up the north, the Irish language has become a bit politicised. That's a bit of an understatement, but it will kind of give you an idea of the kind of landscape and what you're dealing with when it comes to the Irish language. So the Irish Language Act has caused tensions between the communities, and also they've used restricting the use of Irish to kind of be used as a control mechanism against nationalists. So yeah, it is just a language. It's just Irish. But it's become so much more. And as you can see, for example, in some of the votes and some of the elections, people actually dressed up as crocodiles to kind of make a point. So you can see that, it's more than just a language, and you have to be really, really careful because this is ingrained in people's identities. As I've just said, this really demonstrates the link between language and identity and the need for cultural understanding, because if you mess this up, you're not going to just get laughed at for, having a silly translation that reads funny and means something a little bit rude. You could alienate parts of your population and you just come off as, completely insensitive. And, that's not going to be good for any brand. So I used a practical example here of why did Just Eat's branding cause controversy in Belfast. Another one is Orange, when they came up with the slogan, "The future's bright, the future's orange." Well, you might be able to guess based on the fact that both mention orange. Even though something as innocent as just the colour orange, it's something that you really, really need to be sensitive about, because it's not just in Northern Ireland where you get these kind of examples. It's actually every country, well, not every country, but lots of countries around the world have these kind of cultural nuances that you, as a marketing manager, you need to understand so that you don't go into the country and offend people, because the future's bright, the future's orange thing from Orange was done in the late 90s. People are still laughing about it now, even though the Orange has closed down and been taken over. So culture impacts a lot more than just, the languages, the way people behave. It also impacts buyer behaviour as well. So I thought I'd give you an example from close to home, again, using the Czech Republic and how communism shaped buyer behaviour. As much as people don't like to admit it, you can see kind of how this behaviour still exists in Czech society a little bit. And you can see similar kind of patterns as well in places like Poland, Croatia, other Eastern European countries. Although I should add that Czechs would be very upset if you call them Eastern European, because it's definitely Central Europe. So you can see here what I've done is kind of map the buyer's journey. This is from Kaufland, my local shop. And you can see that, for example, they have these things called Letáky. And these are little magazines that go through people's stores, and it tells you what's in the sale each week. You can see on the next picture, people standing outside the shops, waiting for the shops to open. This is because when things are in a sale, people like to buy it. So you do see people queuing up for things in a sale. And in Lidl, I have actually witnessed a fair few fights in the special section in the middle because somebody wanted to buy something that was, in the sale, but somebody got there first. And then you can see what happens next. So you can see, for example, that the Ariel powder is in the sale. So everybody's bought that. It's gone. But Persil, Ariel, that's not in the sale, people won't buy. So you can see that this kind of mentality of liking things in the sale, liking things that you feel like you get a bargain on, is so ingrained in people's behaviour that people actually, won't really stick to Ariel or Persil. They'll go for whatever's in the sale and bulk buy it. So unlike in some countries where you can kind of rely on people being a purchaser for life, in certain countries you can't. And you can see here as well how this impacts with SEO. So you can have a look on the left of lots of keywords with the word cheap. You can see that there are 218,000 keywords here. And then quality on the right, only 36,000. So you can kind of get this insight into people's mentality, into what they're looking to buy, just by looking at the kind of key results that you get. So even though, for example, for British consumers who would not dare call their products cheap and nasty, or cheap because it implies cheap and nasty, in the Czech Republic, if you want to succeed, you've got to have your cheap things, and you've got to make sure that things are seen as a good deal. Otherwise, you're going to price people out and people aren't going to buy it. It's plain and simple. So we've already discussed really briefly what this means for SEO, but yeah, you've got to understand how people buy, what the culture is as well around it, so that you can adapt your SEO campaigns and not just translate some keywords using Google Translate or translating it literally, because that way, you're not going to be able to do things properly. And this also leads into diversity inclusion a little bit too. So just to begin with, I thought I'd touch on what is unconscious bias. So unconscious biases are ideas that you have in your head that may be guiding the decisions you make that you don't actually realize that you have. So one example that I see quite a lot is because I do a lot of marketing with China, and people often ask me, but China's famous for kind of things being, cheap, mass produced, when actually there's a massive, massive luxury market, and the digital marketing landscape is so much more advanced than we have in the West. So it's this kind of little unconscious bias things that are kind of making people make decisions that actually aren't quite the best. So this is where you need to kind of really take a deep look inside and see if there's anything that's kind of causing this. So here you can see as well, here's a picture of a typical family. You've got the mum and dad and 3 kids. But is this really kind of what the typical family looks like nowadays? Because I don't think it really is. For example, here you've got an advert that has a family with 2 dads, 2 kids. Again, that's more kind of representative of the population. With the Coca-Cola, you also have an African-American family here. Again, taken away from the fact that all of the families that you advertise to are kind of straight, white, middle class, that kind of thing. People want to see campaigns that represent them. So you need to look outside the box and start doing campaigns that, represent the people that you're selling to. And again, this can also lead into neurodiversity a bit, because before we talked about different levels of communication, so we looked at Americans being low context communicators, for example. When it comes to neurodiversity, you're going to have to make your campaigns all high context. I'm autistic. I hate low context communication. I'm never going to get it. It's not going to happen. So if you were doing a campaign targeting the neurodivergent population, you have to make sure that you're speaking to people in the way that's accessible for them. It's the same with having your SEO as well, making sure that your website is accessible to people who might not be able to see so clearly, or people who might be deaf. Be accessible. It's really, really, really important. And then finally, we have one little opportunity called ethnic marketing. So ethnic marketing is actually, it's kind of similar to international marketing, but rather than targeting people outside your own borders, you are targeting ethnic minorities who live inside your country. And it's a really, really good way of building up kind of trust with these people and getting people to absolutely love your brands. So, for example, I've got an example here. So there's Shavuot. It's also known as the Cheesecake Festival because among Jews, when it is Shavuot, it is tradition that we eat something dairy, which kind of tends to be cheesecake. So if you were doing marketing in, say, an area that had a very big Jewish population, or you knew that some of your clients were Jewish, get them 50% off cheesecake, or send them a piece of cheesecake and they will love you forever. It's the same in the US with Hispanic marketing. Hispanic people have a massive purchasing power, so it's a great way of speaking to this kind of audience and increasing your sales. But again, you have to be a little bit careful with this, because you can't assume that everybody speaks Spanish. You can't assume that everybody kind of follows Mexican traditions, because there are so many different cultures that come under the Hispanic population. And you also need to make sure as well that you're doing things their way, because, for example, Hispanic people use their mobiles a lot more than, say, non-Hispanic Americans. So do your research and it could really work. If you don't do your research, it could actually backfire on you. And then again, you have Fat Thursday. And it's tradition on Fat Thursday that Polish people eat lots of donuts. So again, if you worked in Tesco's, if you worked in a shop, or even if you had Polish staff or clients, have donuts on Fat Thursday. And again, you're going to be super popular and remembered for all of the right reasons. So I thought I'd finish off with some real life examples. So you can see some campaign fails. So here you can see bedding. You'd think it's quite simple. You think, I'm just going to sell my bedding everywhere. But I'll give you an example in the Czech Republic. Our pillowcases are a lot bigger because Czech pillows are a lot bigger than, say, ones you get in the UK or Ireland. And lots of people use single duvets rather than double duvets. So in Tesco, at the end of the month, they always have sales on duvet covers and pillowcases that actually are the wrong size. Whereas if these people who made all of these duvets and pillowcases localize their product, it'd probably get sold. Another example that I helped a client with is, for example, somebody wanted to do a campaign for pests. So writing loads and loads of content about foxes, because in the UK and Ireland, foxes are the biggest pests. Where I live, you don't see foxes. They kind of live in the forest. But the biggest pests that we get are moles. So you can't go out with the fox content because no one's searching for it. It's completely irrelevant and you're just going to be wasting your money. Whereas actually, if you had a campaign around moles and what to do with moles and how to stop moles sticking up your garden, it's going to be something that resonates with the local audience and it's going to be really popular. And another example as well, a company wanted to go out with a campaign that targeted the average Czech, not, say, people who lived in the country who had bigger houses, the average Czech who lives in Prague. So we have a bit of an issue there. In big cities, people live in flats. So you can see, where are people going to mow their grass in Prague in their flats? And not really. So it doesn't really work. And again, just a final one, you can all probably see what's wrong with this. Pringles doing a Ramadan special and having smoky bacon flavour crisps. So I think this is a time where you can all just facepalm and think, what were they thinking? Because that's a bit ridiculous. And then finally, a really good example of localization you can see in certain films. So you can see Buzz Lightyear. He's standing in front of an American flag for the USA version of the film, and in the international version of the film, he stood in front of a globe. You can see another example here of in the USA, Canada, and Russia, people are playing ice hockey, and in the rest of the world, they're playing football. So it's localizing the film to the audience so that people can really, resonate with what's going on in the film. Well, that's it. Thank you very much. If anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I do have that ebook on the SlideShare, so feel free to take a look at that as well if you want some more in-depth information. But hope you enjoyed the talk.